You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hi, I'm Joe Heath.
I'm here, I guess.
This is the Watch-A-Thon of Rassilon.
Do you want to do that again?
No, I like that one.
Yeah. Just say your name, though.
I'm Toni Heath.
All right, let's kick this off. Today we're going to be talking about the third episode of the second series of Doctor Who, School Reunion, which aired April 26th, 2006. True facts! And joining us are two returning guests, their first time doing New Who with us.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's Ashley Raburn and R. Siler. Hello!
What's up?
Hey there.
You've been on the podcast before, but there may be people who's listening to this podcast who are like, I don't want to listen to Classic Who. I only care about New Who. So they may not know who you are. So let's start with Ashley. Tell us who you are.
Well, I'm no one, really.
What's your deal?
So I'm Ashley Raburn. I've been in the Doctor Who community for, I don't know, probably about 15, 20 years. I've been a Doctor Who fan my entire life. I watched Doctor Who for the first time probably when I was 2 years old. I'm kind of known for being a massive Ice Warrior fan. I love the Ice Warriors. And I actually worked with Alan at Timegate / Wholanta, that convention. And while I was there, I got involved, a friend of mine, Josh Wilson, we met at that convention, and we went on and did the Oncoming Storm podcast, which was a podcast about spin-off media. So we talked about the books in the wilderness years, talked about audios, things like that. We did that for about 6 years, and honestly I've not done a lot since then until recently. Alan pulled me out of retirement to be on his new podcast. I was only supposed to be a guest, and then I just kept showing up. So, and that podcast is Doctor Who A to Z, which Alan can tell you more about. But I really think he brought me on because Josh, who was my old co-host, and he was also the co-host on this, we just love to fight. And so I think he was trying to stir up the pot and have drama on his show, because we just we disagree with each other no matter what, if we agree or not. So it's always fun to have a conversation with us.
Drama makes great ratings. Just telling you.
You seen the Fifth Doctor? That's how that works. Conflict.
Right, exactly. You and Josh are the Tegan and Doctor of our little group.
Yeah. I'm the Doctor because I'm right. Alan wasn't able to be there the last episode. Alan wasn't able to be there, so we did an episode, and we kind of are doing like a spin-off series for when Alan isn't there. We can do this, and it's called The Games of Rassilon, and it is we just talk about games made about Doctor Who, and so we talked about the Doctor Who role-playing games this last week, the history of Doctor Who role-playing games, and I'm a big role-playing game guy. I've written a few things and done a few things like that, but we're also in the middle of kind of doing a role-playing game. I'm recording them, and we might put them out, doing one of the newer versions of Doctor Who. We might put them on that feed as well, so it's kind of fun.
Nice. That reminds me, one of our other guests, Ben Padden, has a Doctor Who RPG, so check that out too. The Game of Rassilon.
The Game of Rassilon. Yeah.
You're the games. You're plural, so you're fine.
Right.
Well, ours isn't a series. Ours is just a mini series within this, and it is. We'll be talking about board games and different things, but that's just a when we get to it kind of thing.
Whenever you can convince Alan not to be on.
Right.
Or whenever he just tells us, hey, by the way, you guys deal with this week.
That's awesome. We need something like that. So, Alan, tell us who you are.
Well, I am Alan, and I used to run Timegate and Wholanta, the convention here in Atlanta that ran for 17 years, and that's where I got to know Ashley, and currently am running Doctor Who A to Z, more formally Doctor Who Auton to Zygon. And by the name, we're covering all things Doctor Who, whatever comes to mind that week. We'll do an episode review or an RPG review. And the episode that Josh and Ashley recorded about RPGs was excellent.
Lots of fighting.
I had to edit it, so I had to, listen to it. And it turned out really well. They did a great job. And I've written a few books and have a new one on the way.
Ooh.
Yeah, so there should be announcements about that soon.
Exciting.
That's Cosmic Press, right?
Yeah, Cosmic Press, which is I've sort of expanded it to Cosmic Creative, so I can do other things, like fold other things into it, like my podcast and like some other projects that we have coming up.
Very cool. And so this Doctor Who A to Z, you're not doing it alphabetically?
No. I mean, it's from A to Z, but not necessarily in that order.
Okay, that's very timey-wimey of you.
It's very Moffat. It's totally appropriate.
I'm going to wait till it's all done
and
then listen to it alphabetically.
Exactly.
And then you can do a podcast about it.
Try to piece it together.
That's very Joe.
It totally is.
The Watch-A-Thon of A to Z.
That's right.
Okay, since I've got you both here, when are we doing Chattahooga? When's that gonna happen?
That's been in the talks for how many long years?
We have been talking about that for a really long time. One day, I am. The other thing I'm doing in my life is I am working on a doctorate. So when that is finished, I will hopefully will be next summer, and we will start talking. I have all kinds of plans of things to do once that's going. But yeah, one day I own the name.
Oh, nice.
So one day we will get to do that. So yes,
and it won't be long. Maybe next summer we'll have to start calling you Doctor.
Hopefully, yes. It's one of those things. Some people get doctorate degrees. There's lots of different reasons to get to improve in your job. I just want people to call me doctor.
Right.
Fair. Absolutely fair.
So yeah.
That is pretty baller. All right, so are we ready to talk about School Reunion?
Always.
Let's do it.
All right, I'll do a quick summary, and then we'll talk about it. First off, when I did Classic Who, I would come up with episode titles, because there wasn't episode titles. But now it's not a thing anymore, so I've just started coming up with alternate titles.
That hasn't stopped him.
Of course.
You can't stop me. So I have two for this one. I don't know if either are good. I have Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Oh, I like that.
And The Mrs. and the X is the other one I have.
That's the spiritual title of this episode.
But the Mr. and Mrs. Smith would be John Smith, Sarah Jane Smith, and Mickey Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Not in that order, but here's my summary. When a school starts performing suspiciously well, the Doctor and Rose go undercover as a teacher and a lunch lady in order to investigate. Former companion, journalist Sarah Jane Smith is also investigating for similar reasons. Sarah Jane reunites with the Doctor, much to the annoyance of Rose. Despite their bickering, they all discover that the faculty are evil, bat-like aliens called the Krillitane. The Doctor also fixes Sarah Jane's broken canine, and Mickey learns that he is the equivalent of the Tin Dog. The Krillitane leader, Mr. Finch, or Giles, asks the Doctor to join him in making these kids super smart so they can crack the secrets of the universe and take over. The Doctor thinks it over before finally saying no. Eventually, K9 saves the day by sacrificing himself to cover the baddies in oil that makes them explode. It makes sense, I promise. Afterwards, Mickey properly joins Team TARDIS, much to the annoyance of Rose. Then the Doctor gives Sarah Jane a proper goodbye and a new K9. The end.
The end.
Good job.
Yeah? What would you grade me?
A solid B.
That's fair. I would have said a C, but all right.
I'm feeling generous.
So, that is my summary. What do we want to talk about? My first note just says, Dutch angles.
Oh, very true.
A very Joe note.
There's so many Dutch angles.
This is my first time watching this episode
knowing who Sarah Jane is?
Knowing anything about Classic Who. So that was a very fun experience. It's a much better episode when you care about who Sarah Jane Smith is.
Right.
When you're excited to see K9. It's way more fun.
So, out of curiosity, when you saw it originally and you didn't know who these characters are and didn't have any connection to them, did it lessen the experience? Were you like, who are these people and why should I care? Or did you just enjoy the story as it happened?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have known that it was less fun is the thing.
Yeah.
So it was an enjoyable episode on its own. And I was vaguely aware of, like, I understood what was happening in the sense of like, this is playing on a nostalgia factor that I don't understand. But I mean, all of the like emotional beats track.
I think when I watched it the first time, when I didn't know about Sarah Jane, it was like watching it from Rose's perspective, and watching it this time, I was watching it from Sarah Jane's perspective.
That's absolutely true.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to watch it that way.
That's absolutely true.
But it was weird when we got to Sarah Jane in Classic Who, because at that point I had seen this episode already, and I had seen all of Sarah Jane Adventures. So I was kind of like nostalgic for Sarah Jane when I got to her.
You did it backwards.
Yeah, I did it backwards. When I got to her for her first appearance, I was like, hey, it's Sarah Jane. I know her.
It's nostalgia in reverse.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm just going to start by saying I love this episode. I don't love everything about this episode, but I love this episode. And part of that is that it is, at its very core, it's a very classic Doctor Who story, where it's kind of quaint in the fact that it's not galaxy spanning. It has the potential to be that, but just for this story, it's just centralized on one school, and it's, you know, aliens coming in and slowly taking over the faculty, and they have nefarious plans and all this kind of stuff. And the Doctor and Sarah come in and investigate and try to figure out what's going on. And in that sense, it's very, very classic feeling. But here's the thing. I just think it's funny that the whole impetus of this episode is, oh my God, there's a school where they're making grades that are too good. We've got to figure out what's going on. The grade point average is way too high.
We got to put a stop to that immediately.
That says something.
Right, it does. These kids aren't average enough. We must put a stop to that.
To be fair, they're also eating the children, so...
Yeah, I know, but that's not what...
They didn't know that part.
Right, that's not what started it off. I mean, there were UFOs, that too, but...
That is something that does kind of... There's a scene towards the end of this episode where the bad guy is trying to convince the Doctor to join him, right? He's like, you can, rule the universe in whatever way you want to. And the Doctor, considers it. But at no point does anyone go, hey, these people were eating kids.
Right.
Do we care about that at all?
Yeah, who notifies their families?
Yeah.
I mean, we know from the one girl at the beginning of the episode that they're intentionally picking kids that don't have family connections, but they're still, I mean, this girl lived in a home. They would want to know. I mean,
somebody would notice.
it's a little much.
I think the thing that is most interesting is, like, if you travel back to 2006 and you think about what was going on at the time, this was our first true connection to the classic series. Like, we had seen the Daleks, we'd seen the Cybermen. Well, no, we hadn't seen the Cybermen at this point.
Just
we
one
see
helmet
them in a few weeks, right? So we had seen these things that alluded to that, but in the fandom, because you got to think at this time it was still Gallifrey base, and you were doing online forums, and you were trying to figure out all of those things, right? And so in the fandom, there was still is this the old series? Does it continue? Is that the Ninth Doctor? Those numbers hadn't been used, right? There wasn't anything that physically tied this new show to the original show, other than just some passing references. As soon as Sarah Jane is on the screen, it is the same show. Until that point, it is not.
Interesting.
And so at that point, there's no, in fandom, there's nothing to connect it. So this is a really important episode for tandom in general.
Yeah. And there's that scene where, and we're going to talk about this later, but when they first see each other and knowing who each other is, and she says, "You've changed," and he's like, "Oh, half a dozen times since I last saw you." I mean, that tells you,
right? And in my opinion, that scene is one of the absolute best scenes in New Doctor Who.
Yeah,
that scene of Sarah Jane and the Doctor meeting. Because this is that thing everyone wants, right? I mean, it's kind of happened in the novels. It's happened in comics. It didn't really happen in the Five Doctors. But Sarah Jane, you also have to realize where we were at the time. Sarah Jane and Jamie were regularly voted in Doctor Who magazine polls and things like that as the most favorite companions. So bringing her back was not a mistake. It wasn't just Russell T saying, let's bring that back. It was a way to actually tie the old series fans who maybe were questioning the new series to this series, and it was very intentional. So historically, this episode's incredibly important. I'm not saying that there were a lot of old fans not watching the new series, but I think if there were any doubt at that point, they're like, oh, this isn't a new series. This is the same series. It's just continuing 15 years later or whatever. That's my piece. And that's why when I saw this episode come up to do that scene is the reason I wanted to do this, because that is, I think, one of the most important and most poignant scenes. Another one, and obviously I'm jumping way, way, way ahead, is when we see Sarah Jane again. While the episode may not be great, but the moment that she sees Davros in a few years, it's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of scene. And that is why those kinds of things are important. And that is why I believe this episode, regardless of... When I watched the episode, man, I was like, oh, I wish it could have been like a better story or whatever. But it was also a backdoor pilot for Sarah Jane Adventures in a way. It was a way to reintroduce that character, and it was a gateway to introduce more characters, which honestly, until just recently, we hadn't really seen. So it took them a long time. We got to see past Doctors. The end of this, this end of this season, we see Time Crash, which is a mini-sode with the Fifth Doctor in it, right? But this episode allows that to happen. In my opinion. I'm talking a lot to say a little, but I think that's important.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it sets the stage for a greater interaction with
opens up the
classic
universe.
Who.
Yeah.
Yeah, Russell was very intentional about easing a new audience into, because he intentionally started the series off with no baggage, no need for continuity from the original series because it's so much. So he was very intentional about the way that he introduced classic elements into the series. And the Daleks being the first one.
Well, the Daleks almost weren't even the Daleks on that episode.
Exactly. That was the intention, but there were rights issues, as there always is with Daleks. But there's one little mention about their creator. You don't get the name Davros. You don't get the name, you don't see him or anything. There's just that one little hint. You know that the Doctor is a Time Lord, and it's done very piecemeal, dropping your new audience into a pot of water and very slowly turning up the heat to the boil. And Sarah Jane, man, that's a crank up the heat right there.
And it's great that it's not just a cameo. It's like she gets the whole episode. Mm-hmm. It's not just like, oh, hey, there's this person, then they move on.
A whole episode with some of the key moments. Like, as you say, the Doctor is like, maybe considering what Finch is saying at the end, but it's Sarah Jane that says the thing, no, we can't do this. Life has to move forward. There is death. There is, she's the one that lands the situation for the Doctor.
And they kind of go back to a story that didn't really get finished in the 70s, right? When she left, like, you left me in Aberdeen, like, you get this connection with that. So it's almost like they're affecting the canon of the classic series at this point as well.
It does kind of ignore the Five Doctors.
Oh, yes.
A little bit.
Yes.
But any of those multi-Doctor stories usually are like, you're not going to remember this when you leave. It even says that in the, which might be you only remember things when it's convenient for you, right? But it doesn't ignore K9 and Company. So there's that.
That's true. That's right. Which is strange. It does acknowledge that, but it also, as you say, it's changing the canon basically of Doctor Who, because it's essentially rewriting the relationship between the Fourth Doctor and Sarah, Third and Fourth Doctors and Sarah, because there wasn't romance there. I mean, they paint this whole thing. They use this as an allegory for the Mrs. and the ex, the current wife and the ex-girlfriend, the new person who feels threatened by the arrival of the previous love and all this stuff. And at the end, when she's all tearful and say, "Oh, say it. Say goodbye this time, Doctor." He did say goodbye when she left in the 70s. He said it very quietly. It was almost under his breath, but he said the words. You can hear it on screen.
But wasn't it after she left the TARDIS?
Nope.
Wasn't it after she went out?
Nope.
I thought it was.
It's right before she says the line, travel does broaden the mind.
Maybe she just didn't hear it. He did say it quietly.
Right. That's the only way that I can kind of work around that, but because it drives me bananas.
Yeah, I don't think they had like a romantic relationship. And I think the episode is definitely playing on that as like a trope sort of thing. But I don't think the episode is saying they were in a relationship. It's just using that as sort of a, because like it is
a relationship that like changes who you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a way that like your average friendship doesn't.
Yes. But at the end of the episode, there's two things. One, she says to Rose, stick around with him because there are some things that are worth getting your heart broken for. And then she also says, I'm not going to travel with you. It's time I move on. It's time I get on with my life instead of waiting around. So basically they're saying she's an old maid who has sat around and pined for this love of her life and is finally going to say, okay, enough's enough. I'm going to muster my strength and I'm going to move on. Ugh, it drives me fucking crazy.
See, I take that more as not a love for the Doctor, but a love for adventure. Traveling.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's really there to project Rose's story, right? It's not really there about Sarah. It's about demonstrating that, and so I would go so far as to say that I don't remember what I was going to say. I think that's what I would go so far as to say. No, give me just a second. Yeah, it'll come back to me. I don't know. The old man brain is not working today.
Yeah, let's talk about that though. Like, I do think Rose gets so insanely jealous this episode.
And defensive.
Yeah. And it doesn't she gets over it with Sarah Jane, but at the end of the episode, it rears right back up with Mickey. When Mickey's like, can I join the TARDIS? And everybody's like, sure. And Rose is like, sure.
If you must.
Do I want my ex-situationship traveling with me? Yeah, that's fine.
Now it's the Mister and the X.
I too really like the scene where Sarah Jane and Rose are just making fun of the Doctor. And he comes back in and they're just laughing at him. And he's like, I don't know, this is worse. You should go back to fighting.
I read a story about that they are legitimately laughing because David Tennant came in wearing a very fake mustache. And that's why Rose points at him, because he's wearing a goofy mustache to get a more genuine reaction.
Fantastic.
Genuine laugh.
So he's cosplaying as the Brigadier. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Nobody wore a fake mustache better than Nicholas Courtney.
There's a lot of bickering in this episode. Some of it, I think, a little much.
Really?
I don't like the Doctor. He just keeps calling Mickey he screams like a little girl, and he's imagining him in a small dress or whatever. And I'm like, that's a bit much.
Yeah, it is.
That's very 2006.
Yeah. Plus there's the bit where Mickey tells Rose she should maybe cut back on the chips.
Yes. I've seen that many, many, many times, but it just strikes me as, I don't know, body shaming. Which
is really odd, because when Doctor Who, going back to when this came out, when Doctor Who hit the United States, this was the criticism of the Americans, of many of the Americans, was that Billie Piper was, I don't know, what do you say, was bigger than she should be, which is not true. It's, this was like in the
fight people
were, it was horrible. So it's odd that in that second season, I remember this being a huge, huge debate, specifically when it hit America. It was Americans specifically that were making this complaint.
How stupid.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. And it tells you a lot about our society. But so it's odd that was put in the next season for that. I hadn't really thought about that until you just said that. And thinking back at that time, yeah, there was a time when she was very much critiqued. And this is my memory, but just the difference between like British society and American society, and the expectations of that.
So those are the two moments in this episode that I didn't like.
Can we talk about how wonderful Anthony Stewart Head is?
God, he's fantastic in this. He's so good.
He does so much with so little.
Yes, there's times where I'm like, how are you being so menacing? You're not doing anything.
He's just glaring at the camera.
He just does so many like very small body movements that make him feel incredibly alien and menacing. Like the way he moves his feet, the way he just slightly tilts his head ever so slowly. Oh.
And there's this scene that was in all of the trailers for this, and it's that scene where he's like looking up and he kind of twirls around. He twirls around, and that scene, like, it always that's the scene I remember of him, right? Because he's like glaring up at the camera, and he's like twirls around, kind of. It's very odd, but that was the scene that was in all of the trailers for this story. So that's the scene that sits in my memory the most. But yeah, you're right. His body movements, he really does that quite well. He portrays that evil alienness of it all.
I love that. I love the scene where he crouches on the rooftop.
And then the Krillitane next to him crouches with him. That was really cool.
The best scene, though, is definitely the pool scene.
The pool.
Yeah.
Though, when I was making GIFs for it, I do notice, I think that it's dubbed over, because the pool is probably too loud. There is a shot where the doctor's kind of way off in the distance and talking, and because I have it on my computer and it's in HD, he says the line and his mouth is not moving. And then there's like a long pause, and then his mouth moves.
Oh, interesting. I've never noticed that.
Yeah, it's not in sync there, but
Interesting.
Was it just one of those? Was it shot in? Is it a Buffy situation?
no. It's not like off screen. He's on screen, so it's just I think he was so far off in the background that if you were looking like on like a regular screen,
You couldn't see.
Yeah, you couldn't see. If you're not paying attention, you wouldn't notice. But if you're like making GIFs like I am, I'm like, oh, hey, that doesn't sync up. It's still a fantastic scene.
And he's also clearly having a good time. And that's always my favorite. When you're just like, that actor's having so much fun.
I've only ever, as far as I know, I've only ever seen him in 3 things. This, Buffy, and that series of coffee commercials back in the 70s on American television. This is by far my favorite role. Even though I love Giles, this is my favorite role of his. I think he's so good in this episode.
I really would have liked it if your favorite was the coffee commercial.
Not much of a coffee drinker myself, but
we've seen him in Merlin.
Oh yeah, he's pretty good in that.
He's good in that. The show's bad.
It's just the end that's bad.
The ending it's the worst ending of any TV show I've ever seen. Just terrible garbage.
You're still
I'm
so
mad.
angry about
I'm
it.
mad you made me watch that show because it was not bad, and then that ending is the worst. But I've also Repo, the genetic opera. He's really good in that. He also has a very, very minuscule cameo in not Sleepy Hollow. What's the barber thing? Tim Burton.
Oh, Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd, yeah. He had a much...
Who's seen Sweeney Todd?
He only has one line. He was going to be a bigger character, and it got cut. So he just has like one line in some random scene. So it's just for a second there, you're like, whoa, Giles is here. So... Hey, this is Joe in the edit, jumping in to say that Anthony Stewart Head is also in Ted Lasso, and I forgot about that. Also, Alan has definitely seen Ted Lasso. He's posted about it on Facebook, so we all forgot.
Related to that character, the Krillitane, I always thought their design was a little strange, interesting, but strange. But one thing that's always fascinated me, and it's so noticeable because you know exactly why they do it, but every time the human form of them transforms into the Krillitane form, they walk behind a wall and just come out as the Krillitane, or they'll go like behind a desk and come up as the Krillitane. And I just think the shooting for that, the way they did that, I mean, it's obvious that they just didn't want to do big transformation scenes, right? It cost too much. This was 2006. Their budget was...
They already used it up on the werewolf.
Right. They had used it up on the werewolf. So I just always like the fact that they like walk through, when they walk behind a wall and just come out.
It's like a Superman transformation.
But transforming is embarrassing. You wanna do that in private.
Hello, it's your good boy Joe here in the edit again to once again point out that we forgot something. They do in fact transform on screen. There's a shot where there's 3 of them in a hallway, and then they kind of like turn into like little dust things and then turn into the aliens. It's only in one shot and we all forgot it. Please forgive us. If you can't forgive us, then you're just a bad person. So reflect on your life.
Well, and also there's the shadow scene where they show it like, and then they do a lot with shadows also.
Yeah, I really like that. The door closes and you see the shadow of the wings pop up through the frosted glass window or whatever. I think that's really cool.
As they eat somebody.
Right, yeah, it's lunchtime. There's a lot of dark humor in this. I like the macabre nature of some of the quips.
The comedy in general in this episode is fantastic. Like, I really enjoy when we reveal that Rose is a lunch lady and the doctor is just cheesily grinning.
Yeah.
She is so pissed. It's so good. And then, like, she comes to the table and he's like, she's cleaning it. He's like, you missed a spot right there. It's just, that's very good.
The doctor just saying physics for 20 minutes.
Physics.
Okay. I used to work at Barnes & Noble, and when I first started there, I was shelving books in the morning, and I had these little mnemonic things that I would say every morning. So every day when I would come to, like, shelve a book in the sciences, if one goes in the physics section, I would always say, physics, 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 physics. And then I would move on to my next section. Oh, it was anything to entertain myself at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, there was a deleted scene in that scene as well. Because, he's like quizzing the kid, and the kid's saying all this stuff, including stuff that shouldn't know. Apparently, like at the end of the scene, he was going to just question him so much that he fizzled out, basically, and they had to take him to the nurse. There's
a mention in the next scene, or maybe a couple of scenes later, where Finch or one of the teachers says,
the teacher,
Milo has failed me or disappointed me or something. And you're like, but he was fine. We just saw him on screen 30 seconds ago and he was totally fine. So yeah, there's a connective tissue there that got excised.
Because he's supposed to go to the nurse. And I think the nurse eats him.
Well, yeah.
So,
yeah. Poor Milo.
It's in that lunch scene where the line about Milo failing happens. Speaking of that and the fact that Rose is eating chips, that's what makes the kids smart, is the French fries.
So Rose also gets smart.
A little bit.
Love that show.
And then the oil that makes them smart comes from the aliens, but they've evolved so much that that oil is now deadly to them.
Also, hate it. It's a bodily fluid.
Sure. We drink milk.
Shit, you're right. I got nothing more to say. You're right.
Where do you think it comes from, though?
I don't want to think about it.
A special gland.
I imagine it's just their sweat.
But if it's deadly to them, how do they not produce it anymore? Is this a backstock?
Right.
Or is it deadly to them in, like, mass quantities?
Or do they keep, like, a segment of their population untransformed so that segment is kept alive only to continue to produce this oil? And do they use this oil anywhere? I mean, does it only affect human children? Because it doesn't affect the doctor.
More importantly,
I don't think the doctor ate much.
How did they figure that out?
How did they figure out that the oil makes you smart?
Yeah.
Tests.
Because it's there.
You need a plot for this episode. I do love the scene where one of the other lunch ladies gets the oil on her, and then she just explodes off screen.
She does that.
She does that.
It's fine. She does that.
Oh, that's good.
Comedy in this is so good.
I don't want to think about the oil too much.
Well, who does? It's embarrassing for Krillitane.
It's embarrassing.
Everything about being them is just embarrassing. Transforming, oils. They kind of look goofy. A little goofy.
Yeah, but at the same time, they did something very similar in the first season, which was the whatever the things were in Father's Day that were also a big battle, the chronivores or whatever they were called. These are so much better done than those. And I found like a lot of their movements were pretty good. They were convincing. I thought that they looked interesting and they seemed appropriately enough menacing. And I talked earlier about this having a real classic feel to it, not just because of Sarah Jane, but because of the nature of the story itself. In the classic series, this would have been a practical effect. This would have been people in a costume. And it's interesting to see that kind of character role being done now in CGI in the modern series. The thing I love about Doctor Who and any television show that has gone on for decades is that you can watch the progression of television technology and production techniques and all that kind of stuff as you watch the show. And I just find that fascinating.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there had also been a lot of practical effects in the new series. I mean, you had the Slitheen, you have, I'm trying to think, the Cybermen, the Daleks. What's the thing? The Hoiks that you see, which was just a bunch of stuff put up.
The face of Bo.
But I mean, so you're right. It is odd when they choose, and I understand why. Like, I understand why the werewolf is CGI, right? I understand why these guys. This would be super hard to do practical effects, and if you think about what that would have looked like in the classic series, you can think about the T-traps, or whatever they're the tetraps. Tetraps, yeah.
Was that the Ronnie episode?
Yeah. I mean, that would be the closest thing I can think of that. It doesn't look anything like it, right? But I mean, the closest thing that you can imagine, and there's also like the thinness of those characters. I mean, their legs are super thin, and they're inhuman, and I think that's the point, is you want it to be as alien as possible, and then you add the wings to that. So I think to add to your point, Alan, I think to think about like how they think about what is and isn't CGI is really interesting at this point, because this is still 2006. So from 2006 to today, CGI has come a long way, right? I mean, you think about CGI like 2006, and you're like, man, this looks awesome. That werewolf's great, or whatever, right? But I mean, even in 2006, like this wasn't top of the line CGI, and so it's amazing how CGI, the price for it has gone down, the cost of it has gone down, and those things. But that's an interesting point, thinking about that.
Your connection to the tetraps, though, is super interesting, because as a practical realized monster on screen on Doctor Who, I thought the tetraps were fantastic. Now, had they flown, that would have been much, much different situation and much harder to pull off. They still had their little bat wings, but obviously these were more vestigial. These are, they've evolved beyond flying, or I don't know, whatever. But for Krillitane to be a flying creature and to emphasize the fact that they fly and to have it fluttering back and forth in front of the full moon, which was such a cool little scene, would not have been possible in any way other than CGI. So it's just really cool to watch Doctor Who embrace newer tools for the time in which it's made.
I mean, liking being able to watch the progression of production is part of the reason why I think you and I both hate when they go in and do like new special effects, and you're like, I don't want that.
At least they don't erase the original in favor of new special effects. They don't ever decanonize the original. So I'm fine with it. And in some cases it's been needed and it's been better. I'm just going to say.
I don't know. I prefer the big goofy snake in Kenda.
Oh.
I want to at least see the big goofy snake. There's nothing worse than like watching something and realizing that it's like a remastered version and being like, well, now I got to go find the original because I want to know what it looked like.
The funny thing is, when that DVD came out, I always get excited about watching, because it's like watching it in a very new way, to watch it with the new special effects. And so I'm like 3/4 of the way through part 4, and I'm like, there has not been one new special effect yet. Where is this special edition coming in? And then the big snake, and I'm like, holy shit, that's really well done.
See, I am afraid of snakes, so I definitely
You didn't want it to be better?
I didn't want it to be better. I preferred the version where it looked goofy.
Right.
That is the one thing that I do like. I think the CGI on this looks good. The only thing that I would probably tweak is I think the face.
The face is weird. Yeah.
Yeah, they look kind of cartoonish, gargoyle-y.
Yes, they do.
I was thinking that too. They kind of have there's like an inspiration from the show Gargoyles, right?
Yeah.
There's a character in that show that has that same kind of elongated face. But going back to the special effects, this is actually a really good episode to talk about this, because you have the juxtaposition of the CGI and the practical effects of K9, right? So and K9, not only a practical effect in K9, but a practical effect from the 1970s that has been not even reimagined. I don't remember if that K9 unit had been built for this, or if it was like one that they had found it.
It was one that had been stored. Yeah. Somebody had it.
Right. It's actually that was one from the original series, right?
I love that you know that.
Yeah, it was on the confidential.
It seems like it must be tweaked, though, because when his side panel is off, he looks much more intricate, much more complex inside
than they would have done back then.
Yeah.
It would have just been like blue and red wires and some computer boards.
Right.
Yeah. I think definitely the case is the original case.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure the electronics and maybe even the like motor stuff has been updated. I mean, it would almost have to be. But I do find that interesting. I think you're very right that those you had the CGI, but they opted not to do K9 as CGI, which it makes sense why they wouldn't do that. I mean, it's gotten better. Remote control things with wheels can go over door frames now. The world is much different than it was in 1977. But it is a good juxtaposition we've already seen Sarah Jane. We have K9 now, who was also a beloved companion, and it's a way to get both of those in there. You have John Leeson back doing the voice. You have like these two eras of the Tom Baker era that are represented here, and then you have that juxtaposition between like the CGI, which is all right. I mean, it's good 2006 CGI, and then you have K9 that is this practical effect, not only a practical effect, but a classic practical effect that really shows you the difference between what modern Who is kind of thought to be and then what classic 70s Doctor Who is as well.
It's disco.
They definitely made some changes to the physical prop, though, because if you remember when you watch back in Tom Baker, K9 would shoot his laser at all different directions, but his nose, you know, the little gun part that comes out of his snout, never moves. In this one, it moves, and it angles itself to shoot at these different angles. So that was a nice little touch. That was a nice change that they made. Because the original K9 was always shooting people in the dicks. You know, like in the knees or something. And, you know, when he had to shoot up high, it was just the ray that would go up high. The nose piece would never change. So I thought that was a nice new touch to the prop.
They also, in that scene where K9 is shooting at all the bats, they do kind of include a small reference to Buffy. Anthony Stewart's line, he says, "Ignore the shooty dog thing," which that is a very Joss Whedon-y.
That's true.
Adding that like Y at the end of things, shooty dog thing. That is a very Buffyism.
Also, jumping ahead a little bit, one of the best lines in the entire episode is when K9 explodes the bats and the acid goes over and he says, "You bad dog," and he says, "Affirmative."
Yes.
That was the greatest little hero moment for K9. But, you know, a little bit ago, you were talking about something in the pool scene, and I was like, I've never noticed that before. When I watched it today, having seen this episode 8 billion times, I rewatched it this afternoon, and I saw a thing that I'd never seen before, and that is when they're coming up to the final battle, and they're walking up toward the school, and the Doctor is issuing marching orders to the various companions, and he's going to have Sarah Jane and Rose do a thing, and he's like, "Here, you better take this," and he hands Sarah the sonic screwdriver, and she just accepts it like, you know, I know what to do with this. I'd never noticed before that on the other side of the Doctor, Rose reaches out to get the sonic screwdriver, and he hands it off to the other companion, and she gets more pouty. She's kind of like, well, fuck that.
I've never seen that either.
I've never noticed that, and I backed it up to see, did I see that right? And yeah, it's really funny. But there's kids walking in front of them, and it kind of gets obscured. And I guess that's why. Plus, I guess the first 8 million times that I saw it, I never took my eyes off of Sarah Jane. So, you know.
Following that is another Mickey has to stay in the car. Like the dog. Crack the window.
Dog.
He's like, crack the window. He's like, the dog.
It's a robot dog.
It's a robot dog. He's like, I'm not talking about the dog. But I love that whole arc of Mickey realizing that he is the sort of crappy robot companion. It's very funny.
Yeah, and it's a nice little impetus for him to get up the gumption to say, I want to come with you. I want to go out and do the things. I want to go see the universe and see what all the stuff's about. And that leads into the following week. We get Girl in the Fireplace, which I know you're going to talk about next, so I'm not going to, spoil it too much. But that's a really good Mickey episode. I wish I was on that recording because I would love to talk about that.
I'm really looking forward to watching Girl in the Fireplace again because my first watch through, I was just very annoyed that like part of this whole episode, Rose being like, so you just pick people up and leave them, and the Doctor being like, I wouldn't do that to you though. And then he does.
Right. 1 week later.
Question though, isn't that just kind of in character for the
that's
Doctor?
the thing.
Yeah.
Like at the time, like my first watch through, I was like so annoyed about it. I was like, you asshole. And now I'm like watching it again, I will probably be like, no, this all tracks. You know what I mean?
Oh, you asshole.
Yeah.
Affectionate in parentheses. Okay, so K9 does explode, sacrifices himself, and then the Doctor leaves Sarah Jane a new K9.
He
K9
does that.
Mark IV. This is our fourth K9. So there will have technically been, 6 K9s? Because you had the K9 that was voiced by John Leeson, then it was voiced by that other person who I can't remember, and then it went back to John Leeson. So I count that as 3 separate eras of K9.
Why would you do
Well,
that?
no, why would you do
Because
that?
I'm me. Because I'm me.
But it's one guy.
Is it though? Got a different voice?
It's one robot.
He had laryngitis.
If you change the voice on your Google Home, does your phone become a new phone?
There you
I
go.
guess not. All right, so there's only 4.
And by the way, his name is David Brierly.
David Brierly, okay.
And then there's the weird Australian canine that actually came out about the same time as this, that was CGI. It's its own series, and it's made in Australia.
I have heard it. I haven't seen it. It's probably the only televised Doctor Who related thing I haven't seen, but I have heard it's terrible. I want to watch it.
It's not that bad.
It's different. It's a different kind of show. I mean, it's more in the vein of Sarah Jane Adventures. That's actually why, I think K9 couldn't be on Sarah Jane Adventures is because the rights. Because let's see, the people that created K9, one of them, Baker was his last name, also created Wallace and Gromit, I believe. So you've got like that connection, and then they go on eventually, and they go to Australia, and they make this K9 show because they still own partial rights to K9, the same way the Terry Nation estate owns rights to the Daleks, right? And it's a similar thing. So they're like, well, Doctor Who's getting big, so we're going to make this other, we're going to go and do K9. And that kept K9 from being having regular appearances on Sarah Jane. And that's basically probably why Mr. Smith even existed, because originally they were probably going to do K9, but they couldn't, so they created this new thing. And then K9 would pop in from time to time, and then he popped in from time to time on Doctor Who on one or two occasions.
Wasn't he just like floating out in space or something? He was keeping an eye on something.
Yeah.
Chilling out in space?
Yeah.
And then he basically regenerates, and I think they actually call it something like that, and turns into weird flying CGI K9.
Yeah.
Huh.
Very strange.
It's weird.
Very strange.
Yeah, it's very strange.
And it's not a bad show, but, it doesn't have the charm that the original K9 has.
K9.
No connection to Doctor Who.
No, none at all.
Just K9.
Just K9, okay. Odd. I'll check it out at some point because I'm me.
Yeah, it's worth watching.
I do love Sarah Jane Adventures, so.
There you go.
I have one more note. We give an update on the thing.
On Torchwood Mentions?
Yeah, today, the Torchwood update for this one is Mickey is locked out of an internet.
God, I love the way the internet works in 2006 TV.
He's trying to look at something on the internet, and there's just a big thing that says Torchwood, and he's locked out of it. So that's the Torchwood for this episode.
I don't think we mentioned it, but I don't think we talked enough about that bit where Sarah Jane first sees the TARDIS and then steps into the gym and turns around and there's the Doctor. And that is the reason that I love this episode so much. I mean, I think that Liz Sladen is phenomenal throughout this entire episode, and I love the fact that, and she was very, very particular when Russell first pitched this idea to her. She was like, I will do it, but not if it's a cameo.
Nice.
It has to be something substantial. And he gave her something very substantial. I mean, she's kind of the key to this whole episode. But that bit where she like walks into that dark room and boom, there's the TARDIS. That gives me chills every single time. And then she backs out of that room and she gets that sense there's somebody behind me. She turns around very slowly and he says, "Hello, Sarah Jane." I have seen that episode 8 billion times and it makes me cry every single time. It is so good. That whole scene where they're getting reacquainted with each other is so good.
I'll just watch clips of it. I'll just find it on YouTube and watch just that clip over and over. That's what I was saying. I think that scene is probably one of the most poignant for sure. One of the most important of the entire new series. It's just, that scene is amazingly shot. It's the only moment that we have just with the Doctor and Sarah Jane. It's so important, and you're right, that dark room, she sees the TARDIS, and she's like...
And she freezes, and she drops her, she's carrying a torch, and she drops it, and oh my God, it's so good.
And she knows, at that moment, she has to know that that's the Doctor, because she's like, I knew someone named John Smith, and all this. There's so much happening in her brain, and it shows that, like, she depicts that so well, and then she turns around, and you see it, it's just... brilliant. One of the best moments in New Who, bar none. There is nothing. If someone were to ask me, what is the best moment in the last 20 years of Doctor Who, it is that moment. That is the moment. It may not be the best episode, but that is the best scene and moment of the entire series, I believe.
That scene also ends on a pretty good joke too, where she's basically, I still don't know if I believe it's you. sort of thing. And then you hear, ah, from somewhere else. She's like, okay, now I believe it.
I love that line. But that whole thing about, she's like, you look incredible. And he says, so do you. And she goes, I got old. Oh my God. That just breaks my heart every time, because, you know, at Liz Sladen's age, she looks phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I never thought about this before until this afternoon when I watched it. But the thing that really stuck a knife in my heart at the very end, when she's leaving the TARDIS and she says to Rose, find me one day if you need to. And I was like, but now Liz Sladen is dead. Rose will never find Sarah Jane. And that just killed me. That just absolutely killed me.
The goodbye scene also just takes on like a whole new feeling too.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is so great about that scene also, recently on our podcast, we talked about the Tom Baker seasons. And one of my favorite is season 14. So when she leaves, leading up to that, the Doctor had been talking about how he is not human, right? He's like, I'm not human. I'm alien. I am different. I survive and everyone else leaves, right? So all of this, and that's how we come right back to that conversation in this scene also. Like, I hadn't thought about that till now. This isn't just this is kind of a conversation that had been happening with Rose and the Doctor, so it's on his mind, but it was a conversation that was going on with Sarah Jane too. Oh, I know you're an alien, you're a Time Lord, you know, and he's like, I walk in eternity, all this stuff. So you come back exactly where you leave off with the Doctor in 1970, in, what was that, 76? When Sarah Jane leaves, and then when she comes back, he's still like, look, everyone's dead. They all died. They're all gone. Like, there are no more. Not only have I outlived all of you guys, I've also outlived the Time Lords. I've outlived everyone. Like, I am the only one. And he was talking about this kind of stuff in that series too, or in that season when he was doing. So it really does it, and I don't even know that it was intentional, but that's something that I noticed as we were watching, as we were talking about the Fourth Doctor on our podcast, is how aware of who he was at that time in that character's life, that he's like, all these people just come and go. I walk in eternity. Everyone else dies. I'm not human. I have a different morality code, all of this stuff. And it comes right back up here. And I love that. Like, I absolutely love that. And I think that's also why this scene is so poignant, because it continues that same line of thought that he was talking about all those years ago.
It's a good episode.
Yeah, it really is. It's a lot of fun.
I have one other little note, which is I called the chips brain food. But
and you wrote that down, huh?
I did. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back for final thoughts.
Check out the Modern Musicology podcast, where each week we talk about things like
what makes a great drummer,
our favorite rock documentaries,
songs we love by artists we don't love,
our favorite concert memories,
songs that should have been singles,
and all of our favorite music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and now.
Do not use Modern Musicology if you're allergic to it. Modern Musicology may produce itching, dizziness, vertigo, temporary blindness, or heart palpitations. Do not taunt Modern Musicology.
Ask your doctor about switching to Modern Musicology.
And we're back. Tony, do you know what time it is?
I do.
What time is it?
Oh, you want me to tell you?
Yes, please.
It is 2:12 p.m. It's St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, that's
in case
true.
anyone was wondering.
You guys wearing green?
No.
No.
Pinch.
Oh, ow. Dang, man.
Is there anything else you'd like to know?
Yeah,
Anything else I can help you with?
What do we do at this point in the podcast besides this bit that you refuse to drop?
I won't ever. It is time for final thoughts.
I love this episode. I think it is fantastic. We get to see Sarah again. We get to see the K9 again. We have this continuation of a story from 1976 that gets a new take on it. You introduce classic Who into new Who properly, and it's a whole different type of scenario. So I think this is fantastic, and I just think, and like I said before, I think that one story is just so incredibly, or that one scene is so incredibly poignant and it is the best scene in all of New Who, I believe. So I think it is fantastic. I am super excited, I just still love this episode. I can watch this episode over and over, and I love it.
We mentioned a little bit ago about God damn it! What was my point going to be? Frack. What was it? Something about Shooty dog thing. It's so funny now because we have a doctor whose first name is Shooty.
Oh, that's true.
Every time I think about Shooty Gatwa, I always think he's a Shooty dog thing. That's so beyond the point.
I think of Shooty. What is it? Shooty Bang Bang. What was it?
Chitty.
What was their names? The cops in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh.
There's it's Shooty and Bang Bang.
Oh.
I think of their names.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I really do love this story a lot. And we were talking earlier about Sarah Jane being the connection for classic fans who were coming into the new series. And in a way, that was me, because as much as I liked the first season, I really had a hard time finding my Doctor Who in that season. And I had a hard time connecting with Eccleston, even though I liked him a lot. And there were moments that I thought, oh my God, that's the Doctor. For the most part, for the first, at least half of that first season, I really had a hard time finding my Doctor in his character, And so it seemed like this, not necessarily that this was Doctor Who in name only, but it seemed like something that was so different that it was hard for me to connect to. And that sort of continued on through most of the first season. I really liked David when he came in, and I thought this seems so much more doctorish. But then Sarah Jane Smith steps into the room, and it's like no time has passed. So I'm basically the fan that this episode was made for. And I will say that it worked, and that I did find that connection to it. And, now I do have I find the whole Mrs. and the X angle to be really cringy and very unnecessary. You could have told a good story about an old companion coming back and how that makes the new companion feel, in the sense of, so these adventures aren't going to go on forever. You're just going to drop me and leave me behind, without doing the romance angle. But, that's so Russell. He is so painting Martha as the unrequited love and how that makes her feel and all this kind of stuff. And I just don't find it necessary in this episode. But aside from that, it is so good. The Krillitanes are a decent enough threat in this episode that they're interesting, and I don't think they would ever warrant being brought back. But for this one episode, they're well served, I think. You have a phenomenal main villain, and you've got a doctor who you find out, all these things. We didn't really talk that much about the doctor in our review, but you've got that scene at the pool where he's like, I used to have so much mercy. You get one warning. And you're like, dude, that's good stuff. But everything kind of revolves around Sarah Jane. And I think that for the most part, what she got and what Liz gave back to the camera, to the audience, is so good that it just makes my nostalgic heart just feel all silly and goofy and warm. And I just love it.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing of, I appreciate the chance to watch this with the knowledge of having watched all of Classic Who, because it's a completely different experience. I really liked what you said about you're going from Rose's perspective of oh, there's this person that I don't know that has a history with the Doctor, and I don't know how I feel about that. That's kind of your first viewing if you haven't seen Classic Who, to going to the Doctor's perspective of oh shit, it's Sarah Jane. She's back.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I never really thought about that, But that's really interesting to hear.
I don't know. It's great to be able to watch this episode with both those perspectives in mind. I think if it wasn't for that, this would be an episode that's oh yeah, it's one of the ones that's pretty fun. I don't have any strong feelings about it beyond that. It's pretty fun. But the fact that it does have Sarah Jane and K9 and, and those parts of it are so good. And Anthony Stewart Head having a good time. And I'm here for that. It's a pretty solid episode.
my turn. You guys said everything. But yeah, I do enjoy the coming at it from two different angles thing, which I think just goes to show how well written this episode is, that it works for new viewers and it works for people.
Which is a hard thing to do when
Yeah.
it's about this character that people would have do vastly different reactions to.
And I think that's because even the stuff about Sarah Jane is also kind of about, the Doctor or Rose. They're all pinging off of each other in very interesting ways. I think that's why this episode's so good, is everybody gets something to do. And that's not always the case. Sometimes when there's like this many characters, somebody kind of gets left behind. But I
mean, it's Mickey a little bit, but then
that's the point of Mickey, though.
That's yeah.
I think this is a good Mickey episode because it's pointing out how maybe he feels like he's not vital to the thing, and then kind of like, oh wait, I can contribute.
He can be.
He crashes a car through a thing.
That is a great scene of Kadon just repeating, "We are in a car."
We are in a car. But yeah, Sarah Jane is great. The Doctor is great. We get stuff about Rose and her relationship with the Doctor, and like how she re-examines her relationship with the Doctor, and again, Anthony Stewart Head, just love that dude.
Being here, love that.
Love it.
Love that from him.
I mean, I honestly, there's not that huge amount of depth to the villains, really. There doesn't need to be, but he is nailing every scene. Fantastic. But yeah, I think this is a good episode. Fun episode. I enjoyed it a lot. So I think that's it. I have to say two quick things. One is something we forgot to mention in Tooth and Claw, because we were talking about like how this is like an episode that references Classic Who. We forgot to mention a Classic Who reference in Tooth and Claw in our episode, which is that the Doctor's alias for that episode is James McCrimmon.
Oh,
right.
You didn't mention that?
Yeah, we did not mention that. We completely forgot to mention, which is a reference to Jamie. And the second thing I want to say has nothing to do with Doctor Who. I just think it's interesting that Anthony Stewart Head's brother is Murray Head, who did the song One Night at Bangkok from the musical Chess.
Okay,
I just think
you.
that's an interesting fact. I love that song.
That's a Joe fact for you.
Joe facts! Completely unnecessary. So, before we go, is there anything you guys would like to plug?
The leak in my bathtub. Sorry. Yeah, go to cosmiccreative.com. KOZMIC. creative.com, and that's a launch point to the books I've written, books I've published by other authors, and the podcasts that I do, including Doctor Who A to Z.
Yeah, I've got nothing. I'll just the only thing I'm doing right now is the podcast with Alan. So I'll just also plug that. I believe it's a lot of fun. You get to hear me argue with Josh. So if you listen to the Oncoming Storm, which like two people did, then you'll be able to relive that experience. If you didn't, and you just like to hear me talk about how great Paladin is and how great Ice Warriors are, maybe that's my next topic, Alan. Maybe I'll just do Paladin just to really make Josh mad.
Oh, that sounds perfect, dude.
That's not what I'm planning, but maybe that will be. I don't know. That would be fantastic. But yes, that would be what I would plug, is that.
Do you still do the toy thing?
Yeah, I do that. We're still trying to get dates for this year, but we do a Cleveland Geeks here in Cleveland, Tennessee, which is a toy and comic book show in, like I say, Cleveland, Tennessee. And it's a pretty good show. It's in September. We are still trying to finalize our dates. My partners and I, we're all going in different directions. Our lives have drastically changed since the early days of that. We just celebrated 10 years last year, so this will be our 11th year. And hopefully we will have a date for that soon.
Cool. My coworker goes to that a lot. I've been wanting to go, and something always comes up.
Is that Andy?
Yeah, it's Andy.
Oh yeah, Andy's always there. A big supporter of our show.
I'm so excited for him. He's doing the Star Wars Free Comic Book Day story. So that's very exciting.
Oh yeah, he is doing such great things.
That dude is such a talent. God, he's amazing.
He really is.
Andy Dugan. We should say his last name.
Yeah, totally. He is amazing.
I've got just stacks of art that he's done for me.
Oh, that's so great.
Every year I get an Andy piece. So yeah, he's awesome.
He's actually watching through Classic Who right now. So
oh, good.
He gives me an update every time I see him. How far he's in the chase right now.
Oh
so.
wow.
Oh wow. Yeah. Early on.
Early days, man. Oh, that's so fun.
But he's also watching my videos, which is less exciting. It's exciting for me
you.
personally, but I'm also like, oh boy, I don't remember how well any of that holds up. So
I always set him up right next to me when we do gigs, so I can I get to talk to him. I know I get to talk to him during that time. So, and then we also are big Masters of the Universe fans. So him and I talk a lot online about that stuff.
That's so cool.
He's great. I love him.
He's great.
Hey Andy, I want to tell you you're on this episode, so you have to listen to it.
There you go.
Is there anything we need to plug? I don't think so.
I do not have anything
Me either.
currently.
mintypineapple.com/store. That's all I got. Buy my stuff.
Buy my bed.
Buy my bed. Nothing bad ever happened on this bed. I've got comics and I got novels and I got all sorts of stuff. If you like this episode of the podcast, check out more on WatchYourAssalon.com. You can also find our podcast, our Patreon, and more at Linktree/Watch-A-Thon. And I want to give a special shout out to Vince and EL for providing us with our amazing theme song.
Thank you, Vince.
Check out more of their music at vinceandel.bandcamp.com. And tune in next time when we talk about The Girl in the Fireplace with returning guests Ray Friesen and Ben Patton.
Ooh.
I saw this episode for the first time with Ray Friesen. He made me watch it.
Did you like it?
I did, but also I didn't want to watch it because I wanted to watch everything in order. But he's like, no, you're going to watch these. Fun fact, I didn't know anything about the show. Thought Rose and Mickey were children. I thought they were like older teenagers. Didn't know. Anyway, until next time, keep calm and Rassilon.
Goodbye, and I love you in a platonic, parasocial way.
Bye.
We'll see you soon.
Can't believe it's you. Okay. Now I can.
Physics, eh? Physics. 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 Physics.
Forget the shooty dog thing, you bad dog.
Affirmative.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping for the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.